Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I am doing my March wrap-up today, so I'll be chatting about all the books that I read last month. There were quite a few good ones. I read a little bit over 20 books. I read a lot of fantasy last month. I didn't realize it when I was reading all of them, but looking back, I did read quite a few. So here's my March wrap-up, though before I begin, I do have a sponsor for today's video. Today's video is brought to you by L.J. Evans. Her newest novel is Sweet Memory. 19-year-old never been kissed Paisley has a second chance with Jonas, the bad boy she can't resist. But when his dark past threatens her life, will she be able to walk away before her entire world crumbles? So Sweet Memory is book 1 in the Painted Daisies series. Each member in the Painted Daisies all-female rock band gets her own book and her own happily ever after. All the books are already written, as you can see here, and each one will be releasing once per month. So book 1, again, Sweet Memory, is already out now. Book 2 is Green Jewel, which is an enemies to lovers single dad romance, which is out in April. Book 3 is Cherry Brandy, an opposites attract forbidden romance, out in May. In June we have Blue Margaret, book 4. This is a frenemies second chance celebrity romance. And then the 5th and final book is going to be Royal Haze, which is out in July. This one is an anti-hero secret society romance. You can click the link in my description to find these books on Amazon, and you can read the whole series on Kindle Unlimited. A big thank you to L.J. Evans for sponsoring today's video. Alright, back to my wrap up. The first book that I'll be talking about is actually a book that I read in February and just completely forgot to talk about in my February wrap up, so I'm gonna be talking about it today. I don't even know how I forgot this because I gave it 5 stars. I loved this novella. This is Double Happiness by Jen Trin. I adored this novella. It was exactly the sweet, wholesome friends to lovers romance that I was in the mood for. It was simply adorable and so funny. The heroine Winnie is a jaded divorcee, and she thinks that her sister is marrying the wrong man and instead wants to matchmake her with their childhood best friend Steven, who is the hero. Winnie concocts all these wild and hilarious plans that are also supposed to be dates for Steven and her sister, but instead these dates actually make Winnie and Steven closer. Like there's this one really adorable date at this restaurant where the tables are actually hot tubs, and I was like, I actually need this restaurant to be real. And the great thing about this friends to lovers romance is that we have a hero who falls first. You know very clearly, you can tell that Steven has been in love with Winnie and not her sister for a very long time. Winnie is clueless about this unrequited love from Steven, but she eventually does clue in. So this one was a fantastic read. There's some great friends to lovers, a hero who falls first. Winnie and her sister are super close and tight-knit, and Winnie herself is just hilarious, so I had the best time reading this one. And then for the first of my many fantasy romance reads of March, this is King of Flesh and Bone by Liv Zander. This is a new to me author, and I've been curious about this one. I've heard some good things about it because it's supposed to be this dark fantasy romance. Sadly though, I give this one 2 stars. It unfortunately did not work for me. It is a dark romance, a dark fantasy romance. The hero does some awful things. There's a lot of dubious and non-consent. But all of that did get gratuitous just because it felt like there was so much of it. But in general, the romance was just lacking here for me. The hero is more of an anti-hero. He's not a good guy, and I do love a well-written anti-hero, but I felt no love from this guy for the heroine. His name is Enosh, and he is the king of flesh and bone, but he actually hates humans, which is why he doesn't allow dead bodies to rot. So the dead people in this world don't actually stay dead, and that's not a good thing. The heroine gets dragged against her will into his realm, and they kind of immediately just start having sex. There's no good build-up, there's no good chemistry. I just felt so bad for this heroine because she can't really do anything. She can't tell no to the hero because he's not going to listen to her. So I just did not enjoy this one. It was not a fun read, and I definitely will not be continuing with this series. I then read What Hunts Inside the Shadows by Harper L. Woods. This is another fantasy romance, and it's the sequel to What Lies Beyond the Veil. The second book in the Of Flesh and Bone series. There's not actually much to it. I'm giving this 3 stars. It was okay. It's a kind of read where you finish it and you barely remember what you read just because there wasn't much happening, at least not until the very end. So spoilers for book 1, you can skip ahead if you haven't read What Lies Beyond the Veil. The sequel picks up immediately after the end of book 1, and now that Estrella knows the truth about Kylan's identity. She wants nothing to do with him, but their mate bond and her body says otherwise. She tries to resist him, but she's too lusty over him, and most of this book is pretty much just this. She's trying to decide whether to stay with Kylan or not. Like, she hates him for lying, he's a terrible being, blah blah blah, but she still wants him and he is still her fated mate. So there's a ton of that back and forth all the way up until the end, which is when things finally move plot-wise. So is this series the most amazing fantasy romance series? No, but it's still somehow entertaining enough because I'm still reading it and I'm gonna continue with it. I would recommend it for anyone who is looking for more steam than plot in your fantasy romance. I then read 2 Adriana Herrera books next. I read 2 of her Harlequin Desires. These 2 books are part of the Sambrano Studio series, so it centers around this media production studio. Both books are second chance romances, so perfect for me. Book 1 is 1 Week to Claim It All. The heroine here, she's inherited her late father's media company. Unfortunately, his family is completely against this decision because Esmeralda is actually the daughter of his mistress. So his whole family hates her except for one person, and they do also work at that company. So Esmeralda takes on the CEO position as a sort of FU to them and to her father. Her hero, Rodrigo, he was her father's apprentice and is also her secret ex. They were together years ago but never told anybody, and now they reunite as new co-workers. Though Rodrigo is also aiming for that same CEO position, so they are clashing a bit. Their second chance romance is very hot though, very full of chemistry, and I had a great time with it, so I give it 4 stars. Esmeralda is strong and fierce, and she's the kind of heroine who goes after what she wants. I would definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a quick read that has second chance romance, office romance, and messy family drama. And then I read book 2, which is just for the holidays, and I didn't love this one quite as much. I'm giving this one 3 stars. It is another second chance romance, but this time it is the holiday season. This one I didn't enjoy quite as much just because I wasn't feeling the chemistry here, and I also didn't buy the reason why these two broke up years ago. The heroine is actually the one member of the previous heroine's family that did not hate her. Perla is the half-sister from book 1, and she is a casting director at their family's company. She's working on a new passion project, and she knows that the perfect guy to be the new lead is her ex Gael. So she flies all the way to his home, shows up at his door unannounced to show him the script, to convince him to join her. But then a snowstorm happens during the holidays, and of course they do get snowed in. It's the classic holiday / winter romance trope here, and there's also some fake dating thrown in here. It didn't really vibe that well, but it's still there. Overall, this one was okay. I didn't love it, but I still did fly through it because it's a pretty easy read. And then back to my fantasy romances, I read When a Moth Loved to Be by Pepper Winters. I actually did a Q&A with Pepper on my channel if you want to go check that out. But this one, I am torn between 3.5 and 4 stars. Like, it was good, but it was also very, very long. I love the concept of this one. I love the world building, the writing, and the whole fated mates aspect, but it was just a humongous book and a lot of it did feel like filler. I don't even know how to describe this one. It is definitely high fantasy. It's this whole different world. There's magic, there's different animals and monsters, there's these different tribes and kingdoms. Both the main characters have woken up with amnesia, so they have no idea who they are. The hero finds a family with a pack of wolves, and the heroine finds a tribe that takes her in. They do have visions of each other, so when they do finally meet, the hero recognizes her as his mate, his fated mate, though she's more on the wary side. This first book is them trying to recover their memories, trying to discover who they are, what they are. It's a lot of world building, but at the same time it does feel pretty slow just because everything slowly unravels for both the main characters and for us, the reader. It does end on a slight cliffhanger, so there's that, and we don't know the date for the sequel. But hey, it's a fantasy romance from Pepper Winters. It's her first fantasy romance, and it wasn't too bad. I then read the Dracula Duet by Karina Halle. Book 1 is Blood Orange and book 2 is Black Rose. Blood Orange I gave 4 stars to. This was really, really good. I was intrigued by the whole reincarnation aspect with all the vampire stuff, and I definitely was sold on it. The hero is a vampire music professor in the city of Venice, and the heroine is one of his new students. What the both of them don't know though is that she is also a reincarnation recollection of his past love. This time, Dahlia has been reincarnated into a witch who has been tasked with killing Baltu. So she's supposed to get close to him in order to kill him, but as soon as they meet, the chemistry is just on fire. Baltu and Dahlia are so good together, and I loved how they couldn't resist each other. Like, there's definitely a lot of lust, but they do connect intellectually and through music. The forbidden aspect here was great, not just the whole professor-student thing, but also her having to kill him. I love the music aspect here too. I recently got into classical music stuff on YouTube, so it was like the perfect coincidence that I read about it in here. The gothic dark academia vibes were excellent. There's also this secret vampire sex club at the university. There's also a mystery with monsters starting to pop up, haunting the city of Venice and also killing people. And then things take a very drastic turn at the end. The ending is wild. I did not expect what happened, but thankfully I did have the sequel to read immediately after. So Black Rose is book 2, the final book in this duet, and I didn't enjoy it quite as much. I'm giving this 3 stars. It just wasn't as good as book 1 for me. I'm gonna try to keep this one spoiler free, but there is an aspect of amnesia, and normally I love amnesia, but it just did not work for me in this one. Baltu's character changed so dramatically in a not so good way, so I didn't love him as much as before. I wanted more of a fated mates aspect here, and that also didn't deliver. The gothic vibes were great though. We don't have the backdrop of Venice anymore, but we do have this haunted mansion that exists in the middle of nowhere. It's creepy, full of monsters and dark magic, so that whole thing did still work. If you did read Blood Orange and you loved it, I would still recommend you read this one just because you definitely need to get that happily ever after at the end of this one. My next read was Full Exposure by Tin Kim Lam. This one was adorable, and I'm so sad it doesn't have better reviews. I give it 4 stars. It was so cute and wholesome. We have an interracial romance set in New Orleans. I thought the audiobook was really nice, really well done, and I did like it better than the author's debut from last year. It is pretty insta-lovey though, so if you're not a fan of that, this probably is not for you. The heroine Josie is a boudoir photographer, and she flies all the way to New Orleans for a client at first who does cancel, but she stays for the Mardi Gras season to hopefully get some inspiration. Spencer, the hero, is from New Orleans. He is a local, and they bump into each other during a celebration. She actually knocks into his head while she's trying to grab some beads. They connect as soon as they meet. He falls for her instantly, and after chatting about what they do, they agree to help each other out. Spencer wants to make a docu-film about his family's history as the first Vietnamese Mardi Gras crew, so he asks Josie to help him out with camera work in exchange for him showing Josie around the city. It's a super sweet romance with lots of great diversity. I've never been to New Orleans, but you can definitely feel the love for the city from the author here, and I did love getting to see New Orleans through Josie and Spencer. I then read Twisted by Emily McIntyre. This is the latest book in the Never After series, book 4, and it's a series that is based on Disney stories, but the dark versions of them with the villains as the hero. So in Twisted, we have an Aladdin retelling. The romance is between Jafar and Jasmine, except they're known here as Yasmin and Julian. Yasmin is the daughter of this powerful, wealthy man, and he wants her married off. She's in love with the Aladdin character of this book, but she can't marry him because he's poor. Julian, the hero, is her father's right-hand man, and he actually ends up forcing Yasmin to marry him instead. He's a dark and possessive hero. He has his own secret agenda because he wants to take over her father's empire. So it's a forced marriage with a lot of great chemistry. These two get very hot together. There's some good enemies to lovers here because they do hate each other, but I really enjoyed the way that the romance slowly developed between them. They get to know each other through this forced marriage, and they do have some really sweet and cute moments, but mostly it's just a lot of steam. I'm giving this one 4 stars. It was another good, solid addition to the series. It's not my favorite, but it's still very enjoyable. And then of course I had to read the new Jessa Kane, This Is When You Know. I didn't love this one. It was a 3-star read, but it did hit the Jessa Kane spot. We have a firefighter hero and a college student heroine who meet at a bar. They pretty much instantly get it on, and what's interesting about this one is that it's a very self-aware novella. Jessa Kane recently has become very self-aware in her most recent novellas. They almost break the fourth wall, where Jessa Kane is like, yeah, my characters are insane, but I know you're still gonna read them and enjoy them, and she's not wrong. There's a little bit of exhibitionism here, some filming, and of course a psychotically obsessed hero. So it's still your fairly typical Jessa Kane read. I then read Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. I've been seeing this one everywhere, so when my library finally got the audiobook, I had to request it. It turned out to be such a cute and precious read. It was 4 stars for me. I love that the heroine is a comedian because I don't really see that often as an occupation for main characters. There's also some fake dating here, which I will never say no to. So Farley is our comedian heroine, and she gets the chance of a lifetime to advance her career, but she needs a little bit of a PR boost in order to get it. This is when her manager comes in, the hero Meyer. Meyer and Farley have a professional relationship where he is her manager, but they also have a personal relationship as really great friends. Farley is also really great with Meyer's daughter, who is deaf. So these two do work out the whole fake dating thing. They become fake girlfriend and boyfriend for the public, and they are so awkward but so adorable. I love these two together. I loved Meyer's daughter here. It was such a great romance. It's perfect for anyone craving a lighthearted and fun romance. I read a mafia romance next. I read Mafia Target by Mila Finelli. This is book 4 in the Kings of Italy series, and yes, I jumped all over for the series because I've only read book 1 before this, but it still read fine. It did help that I read book 1 at least. But we have a new couple here. It's an mafia romance. It's between a mafia prince, the heir to this Italian mafia, and the assassin who is supposed to kill him. I'm giving this one 4 stars. It was a lot better than the first book because this time I did not listen to the audiobook. If you've read the series, then you know that Giulio is the gay mafia heir who lost his boyfriend. He has since left the mafia life. He's been on the run, but the life does catch up to him in the form of an assassin named Alessio. It's lust at first sight for these two, and things do get very heated between them very quickly, but once Giulio figures out who Alessio is and what he's there to do, they play this very hot game of cat and mouse where Giulio runs and Alessio chases. They eventually are forced to be together, work together in order to survive, so there's a lot of forced proximity here. There's a lot of steam in this book. They get it on a lot, and there's some enemies to lovers vibes with them hating that they want each other. It's great if you want a mafia romance that's full of tension. It's got a lot of action. I would just probably try to read the series in order because there are some spoilers for the rest of the series. And then I read a new to me author. I read Takedown by Evelyn Sola. I've been wanting to read this author for a while, and I decided to read this one because it's an accidental marriage romance. The heroine Melly wakes up one morning in Vegas only to find out that she's accidentally married her neighbor Adam. She freaks out and runs away, runs back home, but Adam has been wanting Melly for too long to let her get away, and he chases after her. If you like when a hero falls first, then you will definitely like Adam. He has wanted Melly for about 2 years now, and he becomes very possessive and jealous and protective once he makes Melly his wife. And yes, he does like to say the phrase "my wife" a lot. The main reason why I'm giving this one 3.5 stars and why I didn't love this one more was because there was so much family drama. Melly's mommy issues took over the whole story, and I got frustrated reading all about that. Melly herself comes across as very selfish and immature. Like, she is the kind of character who doesn't know what she wants. She constantly puts her head in the sand so she doesn't have to deal with anything. She doesn't have to deal with her feelings for Adam. She denies them a lot, which also did get annoying. I like the writing. I loved how hot Adam and Melly were together. There were just some things that annoyed me too much for me to fully enjoy this one. And then for my romance book club, we read a fantasy romance. It's The Longing of Lone Wolves by Lana Pechierzik, which was a recommendation from my friend Carrie from Booked for Romance. This was my first time reading this author, who I'm hoping I'm pronouncing correctly. It's the first book in the Fae Guardian series, and it starts off so strong. I loved the first half of this book. The setup of this fantasy world was great. It's like post-apocalyptic, dystopian. The heroine, she is from Vegas, but then something happens that causes her to wake up hundreds of years later into the future. Now there's magic and magical creatures and things are not looking good for humans. Rush, the hero, has been cursed to never be seen or heard by anyone until he meets Clark, the heroine, who can see him and can hear him. They're stuck together now after striking a deal, and the two of them travel together on their way to this guardian city. So they do have to work together to survive, and I loved their forced proximity here. There's a lot of banter, a lot of tension. They don't like each other, but they're forced to help each other out. But it was after this part, towards the middle and the second half, that things just slowed down and got a little boring. I wasn't as invested once they arrived at the place that they were going to, and then a lot of things started being thrown into the story here. Still, it wasn't a bad book, and it definitely does do a good job of setting up this whole world and setting up the future characters, the future couples. I will be reading more from the series and more from Lana for sure though. I then read 2 books by Rina Kent. I read the first 2 books in her monster trilogy. Book 1 is Blood of My Monster and book 2 is Lies of My Monster. Both of these I gave 4 stars to, and I am so glad that I finally found a Rina Kent series that I enjoyed, because so far until this series she's been a solid 3-star author for me. I kept holding out hope that I would enjoy something more from her, and I finally did. This monster trilogy is a dark mafia romance series that's inspired by Mulan, which is the reason why I wanted to read it. Sasha, the heroine, is like the Russian version of Mulan. She is basically a Russian princess until her entire family gets slaughtered in front of her. She is one of the few survivors, and her sole purpose now is to figure out who killed her family and to avenge them. So she pretends to be a man to join the Russian military to find some answers. The hero, Kirill, is the heir to the Russian Bratva back in the States, but he hates his father, so he's currently a lieutenant in the Russian military, which is how Sasha and Kirill meet. She pretty much nags Kirill until he takes her under his wing to train her. She eventually joins his group of soldiers and becomes one of his bodyguards. The main thing that makes this different from Mulan is that Kirill actually figures out pretty quickly that Sasha is a woman. There's this great part in the first book that I loved where Kirill and Sasha, they've been ambushed and now they have to walk through a snowstorm to the closest village, and when they get there they have to pretend to be husband and wife in order to get some help. This is the start of their romance when they start wanting each other. It's a little bit slow burn, but once it gets hot, it gets very, very hot. I loved Kirill. He is easily the best Rina Kent hero that I've read so far, mostly because he's not a bully. Yes, he can be mean and a jackass, but he's never cruel. He's actually super sarcastic and sassy, whereas Sasha's the more level-headed one of the two, so that was a great dynamic. They were so great together. I also loved how unique Sasha's character was. I mean, she's a female bodyguard in the Mafia, so I had a lot of fun reading them. I won't say too much about book 2, Lies of My Monster, but it does pick up right where book 1 leaves off. Kirill is trying to become the Pecan of the Bratva. Sasha is still pretending to be a man to figure out who murdered her family, so the two of them do sneak around. We do get to learn a lot more about Kirill, his background, and his family, who do play a big part in this series. But these 2 books were great. I read them in anticipation for the 3rd and final book, which came out earlier this month in April. I then read another mafia romance, this time the 4th and final book in the Beauty and Lie series by Adelaide Forrest. It's Until Death Do Us Part, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bittersweet about reading this final book. I'm a little sad that I don't have any more Raphael craziness to read. This man is the definition of anti-hero, dark, villain, obsessed alpha hero. He's just so over the top, but somehow it works. So in this final book, I won't say too much about it, but it was a good finale. There's a lot of action and sex as usual. We get to see the heroine finally be happy, which is not a common thing for her throughout the series. She has struggled quite a bit, but now she is queen of the mafia world. She's ruling with Raphael by her side, so it was nice to see that growth in her. So this was 4 stars for me. I finally finished up the series, and I'm now currently making my way through Adelaide Forrest's other mafia romance series. My next read was Dr. Grant by Catharina. Catharina Maura. I've been slowly reading more and more of Catharina Maura's backlist, and this was yet another great read. It's book 2 in the Off Limits series. The hero here is the brother of the heroine from book 1. Noah is a doctor who has found his dream job at this university, and his only rules are to never date his patients and never date any students. He breaks that rule pretty much instantly when he meets Maura, the heroine, and to make things worse, she's actually the granddaughter of the man who offered Noah his current job. Their first meeting is pretty unique. Maura, she builds sex toys for a living. She has built this new prototype and she's testing it out on herself, but accidentally gets it stuck inside her, so she has to go to the doctor to get it out, and of course Noah is her doctor. Maura is like forbidden fruit to him, but they can't resist each other, so they do start up this secret fling. It's another forbidden romance in the series. I mean, it's the Off Limits series, and while it is predictable, it's still an enjoyable kind of predictable. I thought Maura's character was fun. I mean, she builds sex toys, and I loved how hard Noah fell for her. There's a little bit of angst, a little bit of groveling, so this is another solid read from Catharina Maura, and if you haven't started reading this Off Limits series, then you've been missing out. And then my final 2 books in this wrap-up are actually a duet, and it's by a new-to-me author. I read The Mass Duet by Reese Rivers. Book 1 is Dance, Butterfly Dance. It's a new adult reverse harem romance duet, and I was so addicted to it. I've been missing my reverse harem why choose reads, so I'm so glad that I finally discovered this one. I mean, I mostly read it because I heard there was some good groveling in book 2, and yes, there was. This duet was pretty much exactly what I was in the mood for, though I will say the writing is not the best. It's a little cringy sometimes, and it does read like something you would find on Wattpad, but you know what? I was able to ignore the writing stuff and still enjoy the story for what it was. So it's a new adult reverse harem romance set in college. Savvy is the heir to this billion-dollar corporation since her father died, but she does want to finish up college before taking over that company. Savvy is a very cliched, nerdy heroine. She dresses like a grandmother. She has no social life. She is painfully awkward and shy. She has an evil stepsister and stepmother. She also is an anonymous exotic dancer at this nightclub where one of the heroes is obsessed with her, but of course he doesn't know her identity. So we have 4 heroes who are all best friends and roommates. Tate is one of her classmates and this big football player who has never noticed her until he needs help in one of his classes, and he offers to fake date her to get her evil stepsister off her back. Jude is another student, another football player, and he is this wild fuckboy who has no filter. Asher is the one who is in love with Savvy's other butterfly dancer persona. He's not a football player, but he does work in the industry. And the last hero is Bennett, who unfortunately is going through a rough time because he's lost his football career. He's also probably the sweetest of the 4, but just dealing with a lot of issues. They all meet because of Tate and Savvy fake dating, and they all fall hard for her. There's a lot of family drama, a lot of angst, and the heroes do some very dumb things that they have to grovel for. And they had to do this more than once too, so these guys are not the brightest. So was this book, this duet, perfect? No, but I had such a fun time reading it. The writing is very amateur, but the story is so easy to get sucked into. And of course I can't say no to some grovel, which there is a lot of in book 2. Burn, Butterfly Burn picks up a couple months after book 1. Savvy has left the boys' asses and now they need to try to win her back. So it's a great duet, very addicting. I gave both of them 4 stars. I could not stop reading it as soon as I started. And now I definitely want to try more from this author. And that is it for all the books that I read back in March. As always, let me know your thoughts if you've read any of them. Links to everything will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!